Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. In a few weeks from now, Sri Lanka will see the onset of the southwest monsoon. With it will come the rains, potentially floods, possibly landslides. Now, the flooding of May of 2017 saw 300 deaths. The flooding in May 2016 saw approximately 200 deaths. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. Each year after the floods, we speak at length on what we can do better, on what we can do to rebuild. But we're meeting tonight to discuss what needs to be done before disaster strikes. And what are we really doing wrong? What can we do right in order to ensure that this year sees 0 deaths during the inclement weather conditions? I'll just outline some of the stakeholders who are engaged in this enterprise: the Ministry of Disaster Management, the Disaster Management Center, the National Building Research Organization, the Department of Irrigation, the armed forces, the private sector, the NGOs and the INGOs, and the community. Now, we have the infrastructure in place. We have the necessary experts. We have billions of rupees being pumped in as budgetary allocations to ensure there's disaster prevention, there's disaster risk reduction, there's disaster resilience. However, is this really being implemented? So, the topic tonight focuses on disaster prevention, disaster risk reduction, disaster management and disaster resilience. We've assembled here in our studio tonight an army of panelists who are all significant stakeholders in the disaster management field. Very quickly, let me introduce them to you. Mr. J.M.S. Jayavira, Director Preparedness and Planning of the Disaster Management Center. We have with us Mr. S. Premalal, Director General of the Department of Meteorology. Dr. Asiri Karunawardana, Director General of the National Building Research Organization, Mr. S.P.S. Sugishwara, Chief Engineer at the Irrigation Department, Mr. Firzan Hashim, Country Director of APAD, and Commander Janaka Samaranayaka, Senior Staff Officer Operations of the Navy Headquarters. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on today's edition of Face the Nation. We need to mention to our viewers that the Ministry to the Secretary of the Ministry of Disaster Management was overseas. However, we need to recognize her efforts for assisting us with finding the perfect resource persons. So, Ms. Darshana Senanayaka, thank you very much to you. We hope to engage with you within the coming few weeks. Now, my first question is to Mr. Jayavira, Director Preparedness and Planning of the Disaster Management Center. Now, the DMC is one of the biggest stakeholders in ensuring that the people who are at risk of being affected by natural disasters are prepared to deal with it. However, we've found through the years that people continue to be clueless when disaster strikes. It's 2018. We're literally days away from the southwest monsoon. Could you outline to us what measures the DMC has taken to ensure preparedness?
Good afternoon. Actually, first I'd like to explain what is the natural disaster. Natural disasters are triggered by the natural events or triggered by the climate change. The common type of natural disaster in Sri Lanka: drought, floods, landslide, lightning, and rare and extreme events such as tsunami. And also that the steps have taken the government to reduce the impact of natural disaster. One is the establishment of the legal and institutional mechanism. Enactment of the Disaster Management Act 13 of the 2005 after tsunami hit of Sri Lanka in 2004. Established the National Council for Disaster Management, chaired by the HE, the President of Sri Lanka, and Honorable Prime Minister. Opposition leader council composed of the all ministerial, provincial chief ministers. Next, established the Disaster Management Center and District Disaster Management Unit in all 25 districts. These units were equipped both human and physical resources. These units are established under the direct supervision of District Secretary. Establish of the Ministry of Disaster Management in 2005, and it also includes in National Disaster Relief Center, Department of Meteorology and National Building Research Organization under one umbrella. Develop and approved National Disaster Management Policy in 2014. Develop District Divisional GN level Disaster Management Plan. And in addition to develop District level Disaster Response Plan. Develop and approve National Emergency Operation Plan. Establish 24-hour emergency operation centers, and the DMC can coordinate local and international technical cooperation in 24 hours. And also conduct the local level media and journalists and the activities aware the program. And boats and other emergency response equipment are being distributed among the forces and divisional secretaries. Coordinating tri-forces, police and army, mainly timely response and search and rescue. Conduct rehearsal, training and awareness program for vulnerable communities. And also we conduct the mitigation project, structural and non-structural. Non-structural mitigation, especially more focus on the DRR, include the development plan, the local development, and also the training and awareness. And also at present NDRC has released 1 million rupees to each district for emergency preparedness activities. Those are some activities.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Jaivira. I move my attention next to the Director General of the Department of Meteorology, Mr. S. Premalal. Mr. Premalal, we find that when it comes to issuing early warnings, there tends to be a delay in the relaying of information online. Can you tell us what proactive measures the Met Department is taking and has taken to ensure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated by taking measures to effectively disseminate to the final consumer correct, accurate information on weather changes?
Yeah, good evening. So actually now, when you compare for the last few years, now forecast is somewhat correct now, and actually we are issuing we are disseminate our forecast for the early warning through Disaster Management Center, that is our disseminating media. So actually now we are already taken many activities to enhance the accuracy of our weather forecast.
What are some of these measures?
Yeah, especially now we are using weather modeling, right? Those days we did not use weather modeling. Just we use some data collection and data analysis only.
Okay.
Now we are using, as the other countries like the development countries, now we are using weather modeling. So we are usually getting data, initial data from USA.
Right.
And very recently it was able to get data from ECMWF, that is European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. That is the world best forecasting, data generating center. That is in UK. So very recently, since last year we are getting data from, initial data from ECMWF, and so we were able to run the model, and now we are giving the better forecast than earlier. So in addition, that every day we experts discuss about the possible weather condition in future, in next 2-3 days. So we discuss, and if we see that there will be any disastrous situation, we just call Disaster Management Center, National Building Research Organization, and Irrigation Department to aware the aware them about the situation. So based on that, so they are preparing for the that next few days. That is the way we are now generating with the forecast and issuing with the forecast for the stakeholders and general public. For the general public, so we don't have that special system like weather app or something like the SMS system. So everything actually done by disaster management center. So we just issue weather forecast through media, and that we have telephone line. So we all record. So we record in the forecast. Anybody can get the forecast through the telephone. That is how we are issuing forecast.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Premalal. My next question is to the Director General of the National Building Research Organization, which is also another one of the major stakeholders in the disaster management enterprise, Dr. R. Sivi Karunawardana. Dr. Karunawardana, is it correct to say that the NBRO is toothless, in the sense that what you can do is to issue recommendations on certain construction structures? However, there is no legal basis on which these recommendations can be implemented.
Yeah. Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank organizing this timely needed program. NBRO is a mandatory organization for the landslide risk reduction in the country. So we do, for that we do landslide hazard identification, then the kind of hazard to risk management, and then we are doing the early warning, and then we are doing the structural mitigation measures, and also we try to assess the risk when we are doing the construction. So as you mentioned, now from 2011 onwards, so we give the recommendation for the whatever the construction doing in the country. That is a decision taken at the National Council of Disaster Management, which is chaired by the Excellency. So under this process, of course, as you mentioned, that even though we don't have an act, but this decision was taken by the head of the government and also approved by the cabinet. So I think this decision is valid, and so far we have given about 60,000 kind of recommendations, and these are recommendations, not the certificates.
Sure.
So if somebody follow this recommendation, he can build a house without any damage to the landslides, right? So we are in other way helping the people.
Absolutely.
So in that sense, I think our better to say NBRO should have more teeth. So rather than the ruthless, I must say. And other thing I must say, now this process is well established in 10 districts, and most of the people are willing to take the NBRO recommendation. But of course, there are some drawbacks, because
Sure.
many applications are not come for our approval because there is no system in the country in
Right.
rural areas to get the approval from the provincial council or the project approving agency. Because of that, so there are less applications comes, but now we are doing some programs
Right.
to aware the people and to get the NBRO approval. So I think from that we can reduce the landslide due to man-made activities. Because if you look at
this is one of the major concerns that the
Exactly.
NBRO faces, right?
Yeah. Because now landslide can occur due to natural reasons as well as the man-made factors. From the recent landslide, what we observe, there are many impact or many landslides occur due to the man-made activities. So that's why this process has been established. So I request all the general public to get the NBRO approval when they are doing the construction. So I think from that onwards we can reduce this damage due to the man-made activities, right? Yeah.
Dr. Karunawardana, I mean, over and above a request to the general public. Don't you think that all the relevant stakeholders need to come together and ensure that this is strictly enforced?
Yeah, I think that circular directly say whatever the project approving agency has to get the NBRO approval. That can be the Road Development Authority, Water Board, Education Ministry, whoever do the development activities has to get the NBRO approval. So what we are trying to do, there's a District Development Committee, DDC. So we always go to DDC and ask these people to get our recommendation. I think now that has been successful and many people want to get our recommendation for whatever the construction landslide prone areas.
Right. Thank you very much for raising your concerns on that. Mr. S.P.S. Sugeshwara is the Chief Engineer of the Irrigation Department. Mr. Sugeshwara, can you outline for us the exact role of the Department of Irrigation when it comes to disaster management and preparedness?
Good evening, and let me also thank you for timely organizing this kind of very important discussion. When I come to your question, everybody knows the main role of irrigation department is to supply irrigated water to agriculture.
Sure.
But in this disaster management field, our role mainly is to dealing with the flood management. Irrigation department is empowered by the Flood Management Act of Sri Lanka.
Right.
It's kind of an old act. Its latest revision was in 1955. Now we are taking actions to revise the act to address the present day demands.
Right.
Things have changed a lot. That's why we are taking actions to change the act to address the demands, current demands. And related to flood management, our role is in twofold. The first fold is is related with the flood warning, issuing flood warning messages mainly to Disaster Management Center and to other stakeholders. And the dissemination to the public is mainly lies with the Disaster Management Center. And for that purpose, we have established around 180 river monitoring points in main critical rivers.
Right.
Flood-prone rivers. We call them flood-prone rivers in Sri Lanka. So now we are monitoring those river points hourly and 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. Throughout the year we are monitoring the river stages, river levels, how river behaves, and in addition, presently we are actually that monitoring system was purely manual earlier. Now we have changed it to online system, kind of a remote sensing system.
Do you directly engage with the general public or with other stakeholders, government agencies?
Generally, we issue our warning messages to media.
Right.
But dissemination to the end users, the responsibilities mainly lies with disaster management people.
Right.
So we issue warning to disaster management centers mainly and to district administration. I mean district secretaries, divisional secretaries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sugeshwara. I move my attention to Mr. Firzan Hashim, Country Director of APAD. APAD Sri Lanka is engaged in very actively working towards ensuring zero deaths in 2018. Mr. Hashim, one of the issues that we find when we objectively look at this area of disaster management is that there are a multitude of stakeholders. However, the work sometimes gets delayed, or there's a lack of implementation, and there's a lack of consultation among stakeholders. How do we, in 2018, ensure that we take proactive measures and not repeat the mistakes of the past, because we can't lose any more lives? Your time starts now.
Thank you so much. I think this is a proactive measure that you have taken in the quest to achieve zero deaths. And I think if we do that, what the lives we lost during 2016 and 17 won't be in vain, and all of us should be working towards that. Coordination is the most complex thing that is there, but it is important that we don't give any more excuses. We have lost too many lives. Even if we look at the experiences that we had during the conflict, as well as that was the emergence, a complex emergency. Then we had the tsunami, and then followed with these disasters. So there are different stakeholders. The key is how can all come onto one table and ensure that they deliver what they're supposed to deliver. The excuses of everything is in place, but the implementation process has to be done by different organizations cannot be taken into account now. So we have to see what's the one way, one path, one-stop shop where we can deliver and ensure that the message goes down to the people. If you look at the case studies of a few countries around us, if you look at Bangladesh, for example, last year, the cyclone Mora, which was meant to Bangladesh, went through Sri Lanka. We lost 300 lives.
Yeah.
But how many did they lose? Very, very less. And they evacuated 1.2 million people. Then if you look at in Myanmar, in 2008, the famous cyclone Nagis, there are again 140,000 killed. That is again, they say, because the messages were there with regards to the warnings, but the political will was not there. The government will was not there to take care of the people. So the underlying statement there was the will of the government, whether they can ensure to take care of the people. And 140 lives lost there. Then if you look at Australia and Queensland in 2011, there was a cyclone as huge as 500 kilometers, the width, and the eye of the cyclone was 100 kilometers. And it went through Queensland, but the district committees as well as the disaster management committees at the local level implemented their plan, and they evacuated everybody who was in the path of disaster, and the loss to lives was nil. So we have to decide which country we want to follow, whether we want to be Myanmar or ensure that we want to be Australia in saving lives. So that's the key as to how we can take care of our own people.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Firzan Hashim, Country Director of APAD. I move my attention to Commander Janaka Samaranaika, Senior Staff Office Operations of the Navy Headquarters. What measures are already in place to build public awareness ahead of the southwest monsoon that's just weeks away?
Thank you very much, and good evening to all. As all the navies in the world, the Sri Lankan Navy is also sensitive to the change of the monsoon, because we do our deployment of vessels with the change of monsoon differently, because we are now heading towards the onset of southwest monsoon. So in case of public awareness, so we will have to actually get the people, the public, engaged in all the measures that we are going to implement in a disaster situation. So we have some, we are conducting simulated exercises in some areas, so where we get the assistance of people and we ask the people to join with us and get the experience, so how they can respond to emergency situations.
So these programs are conducted across the island, or the areas which have been earmarked as most likely to be hit by adverse weather?
Normally we conduct in our sites, we have some simulated areas. So areas we can make the simulation.
Right.
So in the Gangewadi area in Eluwankulam, so that there we have simulated some landslides and flood, so that people in those areas we get the contribution. And apart from that, with the cooperation or coordination of the Disaster Management Center, so we conduct tsunami rehearsals, tsunami drills.
How often are these conducted?
Usually these are being conducted once in 2 months, like.
Right.
So that we are prepared for those.
Okay. And also, if you could tell us, are we prepared to effectively deal with any emergency disaster response situation as the Sri Lanka Navy?
Yes, we are.
Is there sufficient capacity to effectively, proactively deal with?
Yes, we have the capacities, because we have specially trained people like 4RS, we call in short, Rapid Response Rescue and Relief Squadron. So those people are very well trained, so we can deploy them in an emergency, and we have sufficient number of equipment, boats and the engines and other materials and apparatus which are required, so that we are
Equipped.
Okay.
And also, what are the challenges that you see in multi-agency coordination?
Usually, we have a very good coordination with other agencies like Disaster Management Center and Sri Lanka Army and Sri Lanka Air Force, so that we used to work hand in hand, and usually we meet them during workshops and other rehearsals, so that we know each other very well. But still, there is a room for us to improve, so that we can keep on conducting the exercises and the awareness programs together, so that we can have a better coordination among the agencies.
Okay, thank you very much, Commander Samaranayaka from the Navy. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Before opening the floor for questions from Nadim and Charita, who are standing by, gentlemen, this is an open question. Any one of you can answer this. Sometimes we feel that the general public in areas which are most likely to be hit by natural disaster are not very attuned to the fact that they could possibly lose their lives. Why is this? It's common sense that May means the southwest monsoon. Why is it? Why does it come as a shock every year? Do you think there's a failure on the part of the government agencies or the stakeholders, or are the general public not listening hard enough, or is the message not being disseminated carefully enough or smartly enough, or is it the media that is to blame in not effectively carrying out this dissemination of information? Where are we going wrong? Why is it that each year we lose lives because people just aren't bothered to evacuate, or people don't know where to evacuate to, or schools don't teach children what to do in the event of a disaster, or disaster strikes and people just lose all their belongings? Why do we have this conversation repeatedly over and over again?
Yeah, I think now, as you mentioned, so disaster management has, we studied disaster management after the tsunami 2004. Before that, we didn't, even thought about tsunami or whatever disaster. We thought this is a very blessing country. But now what we have observed during the last couple of years, the many disasters, right? So, for example, now for the landslide case, we said if the rainfall is exceed 150 millimeter per day, the landslide can occur. So, if you look at the last year, we have about 15 incidents. The rainfall exceed 150. But earlier, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 times per year. So that shows that because of the climate change or whatever, the frequency of the extreme event has been increased. What happened last May, right? Last May, you know, the heavy rain start around 9 o'clock, and during 9 o'clock to 5 hours, 9 o'clock, early morning 5. So about 6 hours time, we got the 450 millimeters, whereas landslide can occur, you know, 24 hours, 150 millimeters. You can see the extremeness of the event, and that happened in the midnight, right? So you see.
But shouldn't the main stakeholders, shouldn't they have been on standby? Shouldn't they have foreseen it? Isn't this why we have systems in place to forecast these things?
Yeah, I think the forecasting, I think Mr. Premla will be explained much better than me, but this is an island country. So the forecasting rainfall for the particular area and the amount of rainfall is little bit difficult at the moment, right? So of course some other countries, they can forecast the rainfall 3 hours or 6 hours before, but it's a different weather pattern. But being an island, I think there are some difficulties, right? So at the moment what we are doing, we have the kind of automated rain gauges. So we can measure the real-time rainfall and give the message, right? So that is what we have been practicing. And in addition to that, now we have been identify all these hazard-prone areas. And now we demarcate all the people, and now we have started aware the people. I think that process now, I'm not saying the 100% perfect, but compared to the past, that has been improved. So many people are ready, and the DMC has conducted many evacuation drills, and the evacuation route has been demarcated. And before the monsoon, there are some program like this. So we have conduct kind of community-based early warning program, community-based prepared program. So I think because of that, now the awareness among the people has been improved.
Okay.
So we can see the results, I think.
Mr. Jayavira, is the DMC confident that this time the people are actually aware of the danger they're in?
Yes. Presently we identify the vulnerable areas based on the past experience, and we maps, if we can see that we can prepare the maps.
Right.
Which area are the inundated areas.
Okay.
So we more focus in the vulnerable areas.
Okay, but that's a very sort of technical drawing.
Yeah.
How has this been translated and how has this been disseminated to the people, the communities, the villagers?
Yes, the DMC and other stakeholders identify the most vulnerable GN divisions.
Right.
And more focus on the training program and map prepare in that vulnerable GN division and also the DS division. And also we conduct the national level monsoon preparedness meeting. After that we conduct the divisional level and district level monsoon preparedness meeting. All the stakeholders are participated that meeting, and after that they disperse the government officers to identify the vulnerable groups and evacuation centers and other equipments.
Right, so all of this has been done?
Yes.
Right, across all the vulnerable areas?
Vulnerable GN division, yeah.
Right. Can you explain to us what the National Disaster Management Coordinating Committee is?
The
National Disaster Management Coordinating Committee
comprises all the stakeholders,
right?
Technical agency and non-technical organization, and also the NGO and INGO sectors.
Right. So it's supposed to meet every month?
Not normally once in 3 months.
Okay.
Next week we will plan to organize the MET meeting. Before
when was the last time that this committee met?
Yes, actually this year we did not have a time to organize the meeting because of the minister change, secretary change, a lot of issues are happened in last few months.
Right.
So we plan to organize immediately.
Okay. So you're saying that within the next week, this meeting will be held, this committee meeting?
Yes, monsoon meeting.
Right.
National level preparedness meeting.
Okay. Mr. Hashim, any thoughts?
On your first question about why people don't evacuate,
Yeah.
it falls back to the first question again you asked about coordination. See, there are a few reasons why people do not evacuate. One thing is, as I told you earlier, where in Queensland when people evacuated, including hospitals, the media played a key role, and media was media was there full time, and people were just following the media and ensured that they evacuated. But it does not only mean evacuation. Where do you go to? What are the predetermined locations? How safe is it? So the reasons that people look at is, one would be fear of loss of property. If they leave, what would happen to my property? The other is wait and see approach. Will this happen to me? No, it won't happen. My house is better built. The water won't rise. So they wait and see. The other is again the security. They have their life earnings which are put in, so whether they can leave it and go. So those are the issues that people grapple with. So this is where the coordination is important, where all these agencies get together and ensure that people are safe, they are evacuated, and their property is also safe. And since currently that people are living in most of these disaster-prone areas due to various reasons, misuse of land and the other issues, and as Dr. Asiri said about the climate change and the intense rain. So we should look at an alternate source where people can be evacuated when there is evacuation, when there is a need for evacuation.
Right, very quickly, let's start off the question and answer round. Charita Fernando and Nadeem Majid joins me now. Charita, let's start.
Thank you, Sonali. My first question is to Mr. Jayavira. Now, you said you're planning a monsoon meeting, right, with the communities. Do you have at hand areas that are marked as risk-prone areas, areas that are likely to be inundated, and areas that are safe? And do you have that material with you to disseminate among the public?
Yes. Normally in Southwest Monsoon occur in normally 8 districts. Started from Hambantota, Galle, Matara, Kalutara, Ratnapura, Putlam, Kegol and Kampa. Those are the most affected areas. We map those areas, which areas is inundated, which areas is the landslide prone area. Already we identify that area, and according to the past experience, we prepare the preparedness activities that are going on this year. Especially we create the awareness program, all the stakeholders, and also we equip the plants.
When you say stakeholders, now how will that map be communicated to the village temple, to the school, to the the Grama Sevaka office maybe? How will that information get translated? What is the mechanism in place?
So already presently the Disaster Management Center coordinate work with the Social Empowerment Samurdhi Ministry. So every village has 4 members: Samurdhi officer, Gama Niladhari, development officer, and also the Kupanisan and some of the midwives. So we train them. They disseminate all the information to the community, and they went to the village and prepared which areas are inundated, which is the suitable places for the evacuated, and which is the evacuation path, already prepared by the community and also these officers. We guided these officers and trained them.
But Mr. Jayavira, if it's already prepared and if the evacuation routes and if that has already been decided and the system is already in place, why is it that we're still seeing so many fatalities when such incidents occur? I mean, if you take for an example the storm that Mr. Hashim was referring to earlier, in February of 2011, the severe tropical cyclone, a Category 5 storm, Yasi, hit northeastern Queensland. It cost $3.6 billion in property damage, but there was only one fatality, and that also was an indirect fatality. By comparison, if you take the flooding season, I know you can't compare it to a single cyclonic event, but in 2017, as a result of floods and landslides, 217 people had died here in Sri Lanka. So if the mechanism is in place, then why are people still dying?
This problem is the 2017, we have less capacity in the ground level situation. That's why two ministers are engaged in the strengthen the local level. Last year, the minister, two ministers, Minister of Samurdhi and Disaster Management, Ministry of Disaster Management, two ministers agreed to strengthen the local level preparedness level. Last year, we did not have a much mechanism to strengthen the local level, because during the disaster situation we are face lot of issues, because we can pass the message to the community, because during the rainy season some mobile is not working, telephone is not working, TV is not working. Very difficult to pass the message to the last mile communities, because most of them are more vulnerable areas, living in the vulnerable areas, and also most of them are poor people.
Dr. Asari, I want to come to you as well. Give me a second, Chait. I want to come to you as well, because when the NBRO regularly releases landslide warnings as well, to say in this district these specific areas are at risk of landslides, but still, as we mentioned earlier, people don't evacuate, they don't move to, some do and many don't, leading to disastrous situations like what we saw at Aranayaka, for example. Is it that this message is not being communicated to those specific people in those specific villages or hamlets, or how should the message be getting across to them? I mean, if during for example, during stormy conditions, if radio or television is or mobile phone alerts is not a feasible way to get through to the people, then what is a feasible way to warn those people of the grave danger that they are in?
Yeah, I think now when it comes to landslides, so I'll explain what is the present mechanism to the warn people. So I explain you, we have at the moment about 150 automated rain gauges, right? So first we follow the forecast from the Met Department. So they said, okay, this K-Gold area, there may be rain, so there will be a heavy rain or like something. So we closely follow that one, and then we have our early warning center, which can monitor the real-time rainfall. So those rain gauges are installed in the landslide-prone area, right? For example, if you look at the Aranayaka, right? So we have the rain gauge near Aranayaka, but this is a large area, right? So that is one problem. So if we say the Aranayaka, so it's Aranayaka Divisional Secretariat is a large area, so we can't evacuate all these people, right? So Aranayaka also certain areas now we have identified. So Aranayaka, which area is high hazard, which area is low hazard, which area is moderate hazard. Now we have come to that level, and we have now high hazard people. So we have recommended government to resettle those people. And for example, K-Gold district, after the last time landslide disaster, we have resettled about 1,900 families, right?
But moving beyond the resettlement, the people there, why is the message not going to the people? I mean, if you have the machinery in place, the rain gauges, you have the expertise, you can call on the media to get the message across. So it sounds to me like the forecasters are aware, the people at the Disaster Management Center are aware, the media is also aware, but the people who are about to become victims of the disaster are not aware.
Yeah. Normally,
how does that happen?
yeah, normally, so NBR is a technical agency. So we are giving the technical early warning. So that dissemination part to the general public's life is the disaster management center. So they have their own mechanism, as he explained. So village level mechanism and the divisional secretary, GA, so everybody is there. So we give your technical warning. Okay, this Haldumulla area, so there will be a danger, and now rainfall exceeds 75 millimeters. So be ready to evacuate or evacuation. So that part is handled by the disaster management.
Mr. Premalal, I want to come to you as well on the matter of forecasts. For example, let's take this example of this, one of the strongest storms we've seen in the Asia-Pacific region was this 2011 severe cyclone Yasi. They had about a solid week, I think, to prepare, because as soon as the depression started forming, the forecast started coming in, and emergency services, first responders and disaster prevention agencies in Queensland State went into action almost immediately. When you see, either in the Bay of Bengal or in the sea areas surrounding Sri Lanka, when you see a depression forming, at what point do you decide that it is now a serious enough matter to be communicated to the Disaster Management Center and to the rest of the country?
Yeah, even for 2016 and 2017, so we were able to provide early warning 2-3 days before, right? But the problem was, so still we are not in the position to provide quantitative rainfall. I mean that the amount we will get from the disaster, I mean from the cyclone or whatever it is. But when you compare the what Mr. Hashim said, you know, that Australian cyclone and the others, so those are developed, you know, that in the middle of the ocean, and that
you're saying it's easy to predict the path of the cyclone?
Yeah, path is there, you know, that the prediction of path is not a matter now. I mean nowadays, I mean that most of the models are there. You know that what Mora was developed in the Bay of Bengal, it was, you know, that developed very close to Sri Lanka. In 2016, the cyclone Ronu, and 2017 cyclone Mora. So initially it developed as a low pressure area. So it developed very close to Sri Lanka, just, you know, that east of Sri Lankan eastern coast, right? So no time to you know, that give the, I mean that predict the path and others. So when it is low pressure, so there is no path, I mean that it can move, you know, that here and there. But when it developed as a cyclone, only, you know, that the path can be predicted. So when it landed, I mean the cyclone Mora landed Bangladesh, so they knew that the cyclone is coming towards there, and they had time to prepare. That is the problem.
Mr. Javir, I want to come to you now. For example, Mr. Premalal says that they were able to give an early warning 2 to 3 days before. As soon as you receive a warning from the Met Department, yes, saying that, you know, this sort of cyclonic storm is developing 2 to 3 days before it has any serious impact on the country, what's the first thing that the DMC does?
Before that, I just explained. But you know that we just you know that provide the forecast like there is a possibility to develop I mean that low level disturbance you know that in the vicinity of Sri Lanka. So we did not say, you know, that whether it is a cyclone or low pressure area. Based on that, so that is, you know, that what we are giving, you know, that.
But you're giving a warning.
Stage, right?
But as soon as you receive a warning from the Met Department, what's the first step that the DMC takes?
The first step, we received the warning. We informed our Director General. After that, Secretary informed the Minister. Minister gave the message to pass the message to all the stakeholders. So
this is my question. Yeah. Is that the correct sort of way in which, should it be going upwards, or should it be getting communicated downwards to the heads of the disaster management units in each of the districts and to the divisional secretaries and the local police stations in the affected area? So should that communication be going upwards or downwards?
At the same time, we communicate all the stakeholders. The emergency operation unit, there are police and 3 forces are in place in every 24 hours. So they pass the message to the police, and one hand, other one is we inform to all the district secretaries and stakeholders.
But can't you disseminate the message without the consent of the minister?
Can, but we want at the same time we want to inform to the minister.
One clarification.
Yeah.
There won't be. We don't need to get the minister's approval past the technical message.
Yeah.
So normally what happen? So Med department, if there's a severe weather, they call the meeting. They call the NBRO, irrigation department, other things. So they advise. So come in 24 hours. Weather is like that. So then we operate our early warning centers and everything. So the problem here, as he mentioned, so there is a weather, but there is a rain, but at the moment we can't tell the exact amount of rainfall. This is very important for the landslide or flood predictions. So just if we can say, of course 75 millimeter, but 75 millimeter and 400 millimeter is significantly different. So that is the problem. That has to be solved.
I'll pose the same question to you, because we're talking about this problem of evacuations and people not evacuating. With that particular storm that we were referring to, the 2011 storm in Australia, we saw that there were predetermined evacuation centers, the recreation centers, community halls, etc., safe buildings, relatively safe buildings where people could go to at very short notice, taking a pillow and a couple of blankets. Do we have that kind of system? Now, for example, once the DMC communicates it to the local authorities, the police, the district secretary, the divisional secretary, etc., that this is coming, that you better be ready, at that point, whose responsibility is it to inform the public this village might be subject to a landslide, or this village may be facing a flash flood due to the opening of spill gates of a reservoir? Whose responsibility is it to communicate to those individual villages or towns or communities that they need to evacuate and where they need to go?
Yeah, I think on behalf of the ministry, I will answer this question. So I think now mainly disaster management center has a district coordinator, and he works very closely with the government agent or district secretary. So I think they have their mechanism and they coordinate all the police and all the stakeholders there. They give the message to the general public. For example, last time I remember they used the loudspeaker, right? So okay, there will be a flood, so evacuate. So that is the practice at the moment they are doing, in addition to this SMS message and the other warning system. And on the other hand, where do they evacuate? And last year, I think we have submitted the cabinet paper, so which because earlier we used school as the evacuation center, so which disturbed the education system. Then I think Ministry of Disaster Management submitted a cabinet paper to construct evacuation center in all 25 districts. And last year we have constructed about 4 evacuation center, and this year I think there will be a program to construct the evacuation center. So then people get to know these are the area,
these are the evacuation
center, and those evacuation center in the normal weather condition they can use for some other purposes.
Mr. Sugeswara, I want to come to you. A constant complaint about the country's irrigation system is that there has been no serious or major project in the recent past to clear silt from reservoirs. We constantly hear farmers complaining about මේ වැව්වල රොන් මඩ ඉවත් කරලා නැහැ. ඒ හින්දා ඒක ඉක්මනටම පිරෙනවා. And this leads to spill gates having to be opened in advance, letting water go out because the reservoirs are filling up faster than normal. Is this a major concern? What is the truth of these complaints?
Yeah, really it's not correct. In case of small tanks, we call it village tanks, that there is a kind of a truth behind that. But in case of major and medium tanks, which are caused for flooding downstream, are not having that problem that much serious, except some reservoirs in Mahaweli system. In our country we have around 85 major tanks and 300 medium sized tanks. Most of those tanks are not having that silting problem. That technically you cannot prove that those reservoirs have been silted up to that much level.
So when it comes to flood management, what are the challenges that are facing the irrigation department?
Yeah, really now earlier it was the monitoring mechanism, it was manual. Before 2016 it was purely on manual basis. People have to communicate through over the phone, and sometimes phones are not working during the rainy time. Kind of issues were there. But now we have developed a sophisticated remote sensing system. Now in the current situation we have around 132 exactly river monitoring points, which are coupled with rain gauges also. Now the information is now on our decks, so it's now easy to monitor what is happening, how the river behavior changes, and also what is the amount of rainfall we are getting.
Commander Samaranayake, I want to come to you. When a disaster situation is arising from the stage of early warning to the stage where you need the first responders to come in, at which point is the Sri Lanka Navy alerted that we might need your assistance?
Even from the stage of warning, so we are on alert, and even before that we know that when the rain is coming, so we get our team standby. So as the previous experience, we know that when the areas are inundated, it is very difficult for us to move to those flood prone or landslide prone areas. So when the situation is going to be worsened, so before that, so we have the pre-deployment in those areas, so that we can immediately deploy our troops or relief teams in those areas. So actually even before the warning, so we are standing by.
Commander, the Navy's sort of purview of the coast in the country is divided. You have the Southern Naval Command, Northern Command, Southwestern, etc. Is there a disaster response team in each of these command areas?
Yes, usually we know that we have identified the flood and the landslide prone areas in the western region, western and southern. So most of our teams are stationed in the west and southern areas. So when we do not have sufficient troops to be deployed, only that we call the other troops which are stationed in other areas.
Right. Thank you very much. No, Naveen, we need to go in for a break. We will be right back with the next round. Stay with Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We have a large number of questions coming in from viewers watching us from home. One of the questions that was asked was partly answered. This one viewer says, the government last year declared that they will build 100 safe evacuation centres. What is the status of that promise? Dr. Asiri, let's start off with you. You said that only 4 have been built, is it?
Yeah, last year we have completed 4. I think this year, as far as I remember, the cabinet paper was about 25 evacuation centre around the country. These are large scale, but in addition to that, of course, there are some school has been widening to use for the evacuation center, like that.
Right, so you're saying that it's been successfully done, or do you see roadblocks? Do you think that implementation mechanisms need to be speeded up further in this entire disaster management enterprise?
Yeah, I think you mean in the terms of safety center or the entire disaster management center?
The center as well as a whole.
Yeah, I think what we have to see why these damages are getting increased. The first thing, as I explained, of course, the frequency of extreme event has been increased. But other thing, the human interventions. So if you look at the if you see the land use pattern, human settlement pattern,
right?
So that caused a lot of damage. Or now we are talking about the Australia or Japan. So you look at their human settlement plan and our human settlement plan, or their land use plan and our land use plan. So in Japan, you see we have the what you call red zone, yellow zone, and the red zone nobody will live. Right, yellow zone only people are living, but they have to build the houses with certain condition.
Right.
But in our case, it's not like that. Entire mountain people are living.
So why is this not being stopped?
Yeah, that's why. So that has to be, now we are having a discussion. This land use pattern has been changed from the in the very long period.
Sure.
So that has to be corrected, and so we have to protect our central highlands, right? So that is the major issue. Now in our act we have been address those things. For example, now when you build the houses, so what kind of guideline and certain area we have to have a kind of sensitive areas. So that's what we exactly did in the Kegol area. So we have resettled about 1,700 people, and we declare those areas as sensitive areas. So that has to be spread to the other part of the country, like other districts. So by controlling this land use plan as well as settlement plan, so I think we can significantly reduce these damages.
Dr. Asiri, if I'm to understand correctly, the National Building Research Organization still has no act which defines its powers, right?
Yeah, we don't.
So that
have
is currently at the Legal
moment.
Draftsman's Department, is it?
Yeah, it is in the last stage of the Legal Draftsman Department, and I think very soon, we hope this year, this will be enacted in the Parliament.
Have you pushed for this?
Yeah. Of course, now we have been discussed, and the final draft I think already sent by our ministry. I think very soon they will.
When was the bill drafted? How long ago was the bill drafted? Just for our viewers to get an idea
of course,
of this process of delays.
It's been a long process. I think we started 2 years back, 2 years or 3 years back.
Right.
And there are different revisions, and some suggestions came, and how to get the enforcement power, and what are the problem with the 13th Amendment, those things. But now finally it has been completed. I think it's with the legal draftment. I think with their concurrence, it can be sent to the Cabinet and the Parliament for the final version.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Commander Janaka Samaranayaka, when disaster strikes, we find that there's a lot of looting that takes place. Women and children have to worry for their safety. There's issues that arise with regard to protecting property and life. What measures can the Sri Lanka Navy take to sort of help out with this series of problems?
So usually when the disaster strikes, so as for first responder,
yes,
Navy teams are deployed. So they basically do the evacuation as soon as possible, and we help the police to rush into those areas by giving the water transportation for them to assist in protecting the properties of the people. So that is how we assist, and the other agencies like the army is being deployed on ground, so that they also assist in protecting the properties of the people. So we are basically engaged in evacuation of the people to safety, and as much as possible assisting the other organizations.
Okay. Can you also tell us, Commander, what exactly happens when Sri Lanka receives foreign relief and aid?
So if it
How does the government ensure that this aid is equitably distributed among those affected?
Usually we get the details from the local bodies, so
Right.
that what aids require in those particular areas, and disaster management center also coordinates those things. So as per the directives given by the disaster management center, so we assist in sending those supplies to the areas where it is needed.
Right. Thank you very much for that response, Commander. I'd like to now move my attention to Mr. S.P.S. Sugishwara, Chief Engineer at the Department of Irrigation. Can you tell us what are some of the challenges you face in issuing early warnings? What needs to be done better to facilitate and assist you in your job role?
You mean the challenges faced by us?
Yes, the Irrigation Department.
Yeah, the main challenge was earlier, as I said to this gentleman's question, was our system was manual.
Right.
So it was very difficult to communicate with monitoring points and getting the real-time information.
Okay.
Now actually we have succeeded to install a kind of a remote sensing system with modern equipment.
Right.
Now we have come up with and we were successful in that challenge. Now the challenge is, you know, this is a kind of a technical answer.
Right.
Now we are talking about the weather forecast. Now it's a kind of a challenge in Sri Lanka, get a realistic weather forecast because of the nature of the systems.
Right.
And kind of things. And after falling the rainfall into the ground, the runoff process also a kind of a very complex process.
Right.
Yeah, we need to have kind of very modern computer models
Right.
to
So,
simulate that kind of runoff process.
so there's a lack of resources. Is that what you're saying?
It's not actually the resources that we need to get the advanced, the very advanced technical knowledge.
Technical knowledge in terms of machinery and equipment, or
No,
individuals?
It's the
Experts.
yes, it's the kind of individual knowledge, the expertise.
Right.
Expertise in flood. We call it flood modeling, the river runoff process.
Okay.
It's a very complex process and very difficult process to catch up.
Right.
Now it's very in the world also it's a challenge actually.
Right.
Now,
Mr. Sugishwara, are there sufficient budgetary allocations made for this purpose, or has this been proposed?
Definitely we have enough budget.
Okay.
And now we are working on that. We are collaborating with international experts.
Right.
Kind of
So
Japanese.
does this have a timeline? By when do you propose to complete this process?
Yeah. With you mean now we have started to model Kalu River.
Okay.
Kalu River
Okay.
Basin. Now we have started it with volunteer organization in Japan.
Right.
So they came with their the free of charge. They are
Sure.
giving advices us free of charge. They are giving the knowledge
So within
to
the
us.
next 6 months, for example, do you think that's a reasonable timeline to?
Oh, it's 6 months is not a reasonable timeline for that kind of a high-tech modernization.
Right.
It's kind of within kind of 2 years,
Right.
we may be able to giving more advanced predictions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I move my attention now to Mr. S. Premalal, Director General of the Met Department. This is a question asked by one of our viewers. It says, the government allocates billions of rupees on preparedness. What are the strategic technological innovations that you plan to do to the systems to ensure that the early warning and weather forecast reaches the people who need such warnings? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, does your agency have sufficient capacity to do so?
Yeah, so actually for the, that early warning,
Yes.
first we need to improve our weather forecast.
Right.
Right, so for that actually we already has taken initial steps. The run the model.
Right.
So for that actually now government for this year 2018 government allocated special allocation, right? So what we are going to do from that that allocation, so we are going to improve our modeling capacity.
Okay.
For that actually we need to purchase that that high-end computers.
Right. Does this have a timeline?
Yeah. So still you mean that
No, this purchasing of
yeah, now already
computers?
that we have taken our initial initial that steps we have taken.
Okay.
But it takes time. This is that very high-end computer.
Right.
So for that actually we need to get that specialist that advice.
Right.
So for that actually still we are doing that part. So we are
Okay.
trying to get that some advice from that other countries.
Right.
However, we are going to purchase and implement establish that system during this year.
Right.
From that we are trying to provide ensemble weather forecast. That is that we run the model for that several times and ensemble it and come to a one forecast. So we hope from that it will be able to provide that better weather forecast, especially that quantitative weather forecast. That is that our final target.
Right.
In addition, already so we are implementing, that establishing rain gauge system, automated rain gauge system over the 5 river basin.
Okay.
Kalu, Kalani, Attanagalu, Ging and Nilala. Right. So from that actually we are trying to get those the real-time data and provide those data to the other stakeholders like NBRO and irrigation. So from that actually they can we hope so they can provide that better early warning.
Right. Also, another question that I have, Mr. Premalal, is now if we look at the weather forecast, just to proactively look at this whole enterprise. Now, I'll just read out today's weather forecast. It says, issued at 12 noon on 23rd April. A slight change in the prevailing weather is expected from 25th April. Showers or thunder showers will occur at several places in the western, northwestern, Uva, Sabaragamuwa, etc. province and Gaul, Mathura, Vavuniya districts after 2 p.m. Misty conditions can be expected at some places in the Sabaragamuwa and central provinces during the morning. There may be temporary localized strong winds during thunder showers. General public is kindly requested to take adequate precautions to minimize damages caused by lightning activities. So this is also the information that media organizations also take, and they read it on news on either TV or radio or digitally. Don't you think that people are hearing this same format day in, day out, and it's lost its value? Don't you think that the Met Department should maybe look at more creative ways in which to disseminate information?
Yeah, actually, so you are correct. So we are trying to change, that our way of providing forecasting, right? So the thing is, it is not easy.
Okay.
Right? It is not easy. So still we are not able to, we are not in the position to provide that exact weather, the exact rainfall at a particular location.
Right.
Right. So just that we provide the forecast, Western Suburgam or something like that.
Right.
Right. So now we are trying to change our way of providing weather forecast.
Okay.
Probably that next few months we will try that we will try that to change that forecast, that way of forecast.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Premalal, Director General of the Met Department. Mr. James Jaivira, Director Preparedness and Planning of the Disaster Management Centre. My next question is to you. This is also a question that comes from one of our viewers. It says, there are still people displaced in Aranayaka living in tents due to the Ramasura landslide. Why are they still living in tents in displacement? Why can't they be resettled is the question. Is this accurate? Do you wish to answer this?
I think Dr. Asiri will answer that question.
My answer, I told you, in the Kegol district, so we have recommended to resettle about 1,900 families. Out of that now, last year progresses, we have resettled 1,683 families. We have built the 650 square feet house and gave 1.2 million. So I must say more than 90% work has been completed. There may be one or two incidents, but overall, so 90% work is completed.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about the particular incident, but it's a very successful resettlement program, and those houses are not just a house. Those are resilient house with the resilient features, which can be withstand by the high wind, kind of minor shaking. So our concept is build back better, right?
Sure.
So whatever the resettlement families are getting a house worth 1.2 million with 650 square foot with resilient features.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jaivira, can you tell us how you engage with the stakeholders at grassroots level? I'm talking about the elected officials at provincial council level, the Grama Seva officers, the DS divisions. Can you just tell us a bit about the work you do?
Our disaster management mechanism, first is I explained earlier, national level platform and also the district level platform chaired by the district secretary and divisional level chaired by the divisional secretary, and also this divisional secretary coordinate all the GN division, and also every district we have established disaster management coordinating unit under the district secretary. He will coordinate all the mitigation, preparedness, training and other emergency response and early warning mechanism. That is the mechanism we develop in the grassroots level. And also our other stakeholders, example in the landslide, some MBRO, meteorology department, and also the irrigation department. All the stakeholders are in a place in the grassroots level. When you conduct the training program and mitigation activities, we are coordinate all the people in the grassroots level. Government and non-government organization will help to establish the mechanism.
We're trying to, through this program, discuss how we can avoid delays in implementation. Now, we saw that the NBRO Act is still in the draftsman's department for the past 2 years. It has been pending. In a similar manner, is there anything that the DMC has as an issue which needs resolving?
I think ministry involved solve that problem. We are working under the Ministry of Disaster Management.
Of course.
The ministry with the responsible to act.
One fact, as he mentioned, the present main problem is the message is not go to the grassroots level. You have to accept that one. So that has to be improved.
Right.
So even though the technical institutions are talking, that message is not quickly go to the grassroots level. That's why we have this year, they have made some program to get some of the officers help, and they train
so
this
can
one.
Can we
that
just,
is the issue.
I mean, since we have a multitude of stakeholders here, can't we zero in on the exact issue? Why is the message not going to the end consumer? Why?
I think for that media also can play a wider role. So
Sure.
I think so we have to get together and have a lot of awareness program, and also we have to use the school children, which may be the very good tool in the other countries. So that's there in the culture, right? So still I don't think in Sri Lankan culture disaster management is not the priority. I think we have to start from the childhood and cultivate those things in their habits. So I think for that, I think all the stakeholders, education ministry, the disaster management center, irrigation department, so we have to have a very good coordination system and have some kind of proper mechanism.
Mr. Jayavira, you spoke of a meeting that is due to be held next week. Will the education ministry also be participating?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. My final question from Mr. Hashim is, how can the private sector engage more effectively in disaster prevention, in disaster risk reduction, in this whole exercise? Because we find that Sri Lanka has a very proactive, conscientious private sector for the most part. And the private sector wants to engage with government organizations. They want to engage when it comes to matters of national interest. How do we go about doing this? How do we bring these people in? Now, for example, the Met Department, in order for them to maybe package their intros better, I'm pretty sure all the creative ad agencies will come on board free of charge and help out with this. Little things like that. How does the private sector engage better?
I think the private sector, as we know, is the key in with regards to the economy. What we lack actually is the partnership. The partnership where the private sector and the government sector can get together and do quite a lot. We saw that in 2016, 2017, the difference the private sector made. At the same time, the private sector is also extremely concerned about the losses that they have to undergo, because it all depends on the profits. So if there are recurrent disasters and they continue to lose, this is where they think that they need to be a part of the development process as well. So we need to look at the district development committees. Is there private sector representation at that level? At the ground level where decisions are taken, and as well as the highest level where decisions are made, whether the private sector is heard. The other issue that we also would have is technology. How much of technology is there in the private sector, and they are willing to partner with the government and ensure that there is a change, there is an exchange of technology. So there is a lot of opportunities. It's about how we can harness that and the will to work together. I think that is the most important.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Charita Fernando, I think you have a series of questions to ask the gentleman.
Thank you, Sonali.
Go for it.
Mr. Hashim, my first question is to you. I feel a bit disappointed that still the agencies are trying to figure out why the message is not going to the grassroots level. And we are like a couple of weeks away from the next possible disaster. What are your thoughts? Is it a problem of political will or bureaucracy? What is the issue here, as you say it?
Or public ignorance?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's about change. People are not willing to change. We need to go away from the traditional way that we have been working. It's not worth talking about how we have been doing, whether it is developed or underdeveloped countries or so on. But if you look at the resources in the country, we have enough of resources. And there are a lot of people who are willing to work together. We spoke about the private sector. We also have the development partners, we have the UN agencies, we have the NGOs, INGOs, we have the service sectors, which is the Rotary, the Lions and so on. So this is a massive amount of resources that we have. The message which needs to go down is how we can break these barriers that we have. If there are bureaucracy involved, how can I break that bureaucracy? How can I go beyond that and ensure that the message goes right down? A few examples could be, if you look at last year, this happened midnight, but then like the warnings were provided, but how best can the warnings go down? But at the ground level, if you look at the divisional level and the district level, if there are no operational units, 24/7 operational units who can take this message and give it out rather than they waiting for the next day morning to get the message and send out, this is where the issues are. So we should look at also the primitive and the traditional methods of communications that we always had. So in this context, that what is most viable would be if we know that this week is bad and we are going to have a disaster, or we are or rather not a disaster, it's only about hazards. Why do we turn the hazards into disasters? That's what we are actually doing. So we must leave the hazards to be hazards. So on ground level, maybe on the preparedness or the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, can open up satellite operation centers in these districts during that particular week or so, and ensure that they are 24/7 and the message relayed down to the people.
Okay, let's focus on the southwestern monsoon.
Right.
In May. What should be the contents of the message that we deliver, or the DMC delivers? What would you like to see the content to be?
That's a very good question. In fact, if you look at the DUNE, which is the Disaster Early Warning Network, that's an app. That's an app which can be downloaded by anybody, and the message of whether to evacuate or whether there is a serious disaster, impending disaster, and that message is provided by the DMC. But what is required is, how do you tweak this message so that the layman would understand, and how we can also go trilingual, Sinhala and Tamil as well, so that the people would take it seriously. So the communication is the most important thing, and also ensuring that it goes down to the right people. And with that comes the implementation of the law. If there are issues with regards to the constructions or blockages or so on, the law also needs to take its course rightly, so that we break this barrier and ensure that the people take a decision and trust the messages which come from the hierarchy.
Commander Samaranayaka, now we know that the armed forces, they usually, when they set their mind to something, they do it. They don't sit on anything. So can you tell us how the Navy prepares to better, better relief services during a disaster situation? Do you do any kind of special training, simulated training or something? Do you do anything like that? How do you prepare yourself?
Yes, we have, as I mentioned earlier also, so specially trained units. The main one is the Rapid Response Rescue and Relief Unit. So they are trained to do the rescue parts and assist people when there is a flood or landslide or whatever it is. So apart from that, we have the diving unit. They are specialized in diving and swimming, so they can go anywhere and do any rescue when the flood situation occurs. And further, we have newly established marine unit, so they are also deployed even in the last during the last flood situation. So they also do the training and all the rehearsals, simulated exercises in order to respond in any flood or landslide situation.
Does the Navy do its own research? Have you identified risk areas?
Yes, we also have identified the risk areas. Apart from that, we get the all data and the mapping from the Disaster Management Center, because they do it comprehensively, so that we map all the things together, and we have identified the flood prone areas and landslide prone areas, so in order to quickly respond in a situation.
You spoke of pre-deployment earlier. Now,
Yes.
last year or the year before, we saw in a flood situation, the Navy also had to transport boats from a particular area to areas that were inundated. So here there are a lot of challenges that you have to go through. So have you looked at rescue assets being deployed in these areas ahead of the rainy season?
Yes, even during the last rainy season in November, so even though there was no flood, so we had deployed our boats and the relief teams in particular areas like in the Horana, Millania, Ratnapura, and in the southern areas. So when there is no requirement for them to be deployed, so we could take them back. So we do early deployments in identified flood and landslide prone areas.
Dr. Asari, you drew examples of how other countries had categorized different areas for construction. You spoke about a yellow zone, a red zone. Now in Sri Lanka, we know that politicians at local government level intervene all the time to allow permits in perhaps in risk-prone areas. How is this challenge affecting you?
I think this for the construction in landslide-prone areas, so far there is no political interference, because you know, if we give the wrong report for the next rain season, so the result will come. So only thing our problem is some person are not coming to this process, right? So that we are having some programs and awareness program, encourage people to get our advice, right? So I think with that we can ensure that no more landslide will occur due to the man-made activities, right? So there's no political involvement or political interference for our process, because
I meant in construction.
No, construction, of course, that's why. So now our NBRO is what we are doing. So now for once you submit the application to the provincial council or municipal council, so we will receive the copy and we will assess the degree of danger due to landslides. So if there is a high risk, we said not to do in construction. And so far we have rejected many applications, I must say more than 200 or like something. But on the other hand, if there is some kind of risk, we give kind of advice. You have to have a kind of retaining wall here, you should not cut the slopes, and you have to have this steps construction. So this kind of advice. So at the moment the problem is, sometimes even though we are giving the recommendations, so nobody to follow that, nobody to see whether these recommendations are being implemented. That's why we are telling that local authority, when you are issuing the COC, again refer to the NBRO, those things. So that process is under discussion. I think then we can assure that our recommendation have been practiced in the field. So that issues is there. But on the other hand, so I think that process is kind of many areas is successful process.
Mr. Javir, another problem that ordinary people face during disasters is the disorganized lifestyle. For example, if there's a flood, you may be running around looking for your property deeds, your birth certificates, all the important documents. Are you going to incorporate that message also in your meeting, in your process of educating the public?
When we conduct the GN level community program, we aware the people what are the documents carry out when you go to evacuation center. When you conduct the drill, simulation drill or landslide or flood, we must bring the important documents. We identify the birth certificates, some important document to be carry out the safe shelter. That is, we informed them, and we give some bags also, identify the gaps. We inform that.
Right. Mr. Hashim, now if you take the western province, Colombo district, Kalutara, Ratnapura, these areas are highly urbanized. what kind of challenges does this pose when it comes to disaster management? How has urbanization affected the process?
It has actually affected quite a lot. If you look at the history of Sri Lanka, we have been responding to disasters in rural areas, whether it is conflict or otherwise. So one of the worst urban disasters we experienced was in 2016, metropolitan here in Colombo, and then the Gampaha district, the industrial district. So that's a massive challenge. And if you look at the experience that we underwent at that time, it was very, very difficult to coordinate. And if you look at the disaster management perspective, it is about not only the initial plan, but you have to look at the area plan, where the adjacent districts also could help. So these are the things that I think we need to put right now and look at a larger area that we need to cover, not only looking at the small disasters. So the urban disasters are the disasters, as Dr. Asiti also said, the land use comes into number one. The other would be the quantum of people in those particular area. Then the other is the peri-urban areas. That's another huge disaster-prone area where the peri-urban areas are. So this is a massive challenge, and you have to have a national plan to ensure that these urban disasters are taken care of, and then there is preventive measures.
Can you also elaborate what it means to invest in city resilience? Have we done enough in that department?
Right. That culture needs to come into Sri Lanka, and very fast. See, what they say is when you invest $1 in disaster risk reduction, you have a profit of $7, nearly $7. But then are people willing to invest that? So DRR is one of the most important essentials that we need to do. It can be whether businesses, whether it is your home, or it can be anything. So DRR is key. So disaster risk reduction, this is where I think all these agencies are looking at. We need to sustain, we need to have sustainable development. For that, DRR is key. How can we invest on that? If you look at the last budget, there has been quite a lot of money which has been allocated for to hold the water upstream catchment area, so that the water does not all come down to the Kallan River and cause this issue. But the issue is, who has followed that up? Where are we now? Within this year, which is going to end, have we done that? So to what level have we achieved what we need to achieve? So a culture of disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management is extremely important to ensure that we also sustain or reach the upper middle income level or so on. Even if you look not only the floods, if you look currently, you have the slow onset disaster, which is the drought for the last 2 to 3 years. So that also needs to be addressed parallelly.
One last question to Mr. Javira. Now, when a disaster strikes, right, if you take, for example, mostly a flood, right, critical infrastructure, maybe hospitals, water sources, all that also, gets inundated. So, do you have a new plan in place to identify possible areas?
Yes,
like
yes, we identify, and the example hospital. Separately, we prepare the hospital preparedness plan. But in the emergency situation, what will happen? So, hospital patients are evacuated the closer places. That type of preparedness plan going on with the collaboration with the health department and all those school. Also, we identify the school for the evacuation centers, and also some of the schools are inundated, and also we conduct the preparedness plan or the separate school safety plan. That type of plan, we identify the vulnerable places, especially in the hospital, school, and prepare the preparedness plan for evacuated that places to the safer places.
Right, thank you very much. On that note, we go in for our final break. You're watching Face the Nation. We'll be right back with the final few minutes of the show. Welcome back. This is the final round of Face the Nation. In 2 minutes, Mr. Jayavira, Director Preparedness and Planning of the Disaster Management Center, can you tell us, how confident are you that we can ensure, as much as possible, a zero deaths policy this time if flooding does take place, if the rains are uncontrollable?
Yes, we identify 2016 and 2017 gaps.
Yes.
Based on that information, we strengthen the local level mechanism.
Right.
And we already deployed the boats and other equipment.
Right.
And safety jackets, and conduct the training program, awareness program, early warning mechanism, the top national level to the grassroots level. And also we identify evacuation centers, we prepare the response plan and mechanism to the local level, and we prepare the scenario basis simulation exercise, most vulnerable DS division and GN division, especially in the landslide and flood prone area. And also we distribute the manual rain gauges, most vulnerable GN levels. They can self-train them how to measure the rainfall with the manual rain gauges, and if they are not receive the message, they can decide self-evacuation themselves.
We are a few weeks away from the onset of the southwest monsoon. Are there officers standing by 24 hours of the day from the different divisions, departments, government agencies, from top down?
Yes, that's the challenge. Although disaster management center and ministry and tri-forces, police and hospital are working 24 hours. Some public and private institutions are not working 24 hours, especially night time and weekends and holidays. That is the big issue. However, the tri-forces are in place in disaster situation. I think that is the big benefit for the disaster management.
Are the officers of the Disaster Management Center on standby 24 hours of the day these days?
Yeah.
They are. So there are officers.
Yeah, especially the southeast, Hambantota, Matra, Gaul, Kalutara and Colombo and Putlam, most disaster prone districts, especially in the flood. They are emergency operation in the 24 hours this district. So they are alert 24 hours in this district under the control by the forces.
Right. How confident are you that the messages can be disseminated to the final consumer expeditiously? The minute you find out that disaster is going to strike, as soon as you get the message, how confident are you of disseminating it to the final end consumer?
This year we identified the most vulnerable GN division. We got all the information, the grassroots level officers, not only the government officers and also the community. We passed the messages through the SMS, police messages, DN system, and used the media campaign.
All right. So you are confident that the DMC is doing everything and has done everything to ensure that this time, if there's a disaster, people know what to do, where to go. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Jayavira. My next question is to Mr. Premalal, Director General of the Met Department. Can you tell us, going forward, learning from the mistakes of the past, what are you, as the head of the Department of Meteorology, going to do this time around to ensure that more effective messaging reaches the general public?
Yeah, so for the worst period for that disaster is May, early May until start the monsoon. right? So generally monsoon start on 25th May, that is the climatological date, but it can be plus or minus 5 days. Until start the monsoon from the beginning of May, so that is the most vulnerable period for the disaster. So for this, I mean that for this period, so we pay our fullest effort to analyze the data and get the favorable atmospheric condition for that develop low level disturbance or low pressure area.
Right. So those terms are a little technical. So how do you translate it so that people, the general public, laymen,
we are not telling like that. But that if we see that some kind of atmospheric disturbance, what we are doing, so we just call that our stakeholders, that NBRO, DMC and Irrigation Department, and we tell them this is the condition. So you have to be prepared for the this kind of weather.
Right.
So that is how that we are going to disseminate the that bad weather condition to the stakeholders, and they will do that. I mean that they are having the mechanism to provide that bad weather condition to the general public.
Mr. Premalal, what's the Met Department's social media presence like? Are you active on social media?
Yeah. So we have Facebook account.
Okay, which is constantly updated?
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. I move my attention to Dr. R.C. Karunawardena, Director General of the National Building Research Organization. Going forward, what measures will you take differently than years before, where disaster meant that hundreds of lives were lost? This time, moving forward, what will you do differently?
Yeah, I think this time now we have conducted many community-based awareness program, and we have formed the community group together with the Disaster Management Center. So, and as he explained, we have given some rain gauges and some kind of drills. So I think those people can self-evacuate it. And at the same time, so we have improved our early warning capacity. Our number of rain gauge has been increased. So we request general public to listen to our early warning system, which is disseminated to the DMC, and obey to these messages. And not only that, if you see some kind of landslide pre-symbols like tilting of trees, appearance of cracking, sudden change of water levels, and sudden coming of muddy water, so please be evacuated until the NBRO team come and investigate
so those points that you just mentioned, is it written somewhere in black and white?
Of course. So
that people can follow these guidelines.
So we have make awareness program, we have prepared the leaflet, and we have distribute all those things.
Do people actually read those leaflets?
Yeah.
I'm asking the most basic questions because it's important.
Because what we did in the community-based program, we invite all the people and we form the leader, and those people and get together and discuss among themselves. I think that message has gone to the effectively this time, so we have very optimistic, and the people will.
Dr. RCB, are people proactively engaged during these conversations?
Yeah, of course. I think because they have seen what happened to their relatives.
Right.
And so I think the message has gone very deep to their hearts. I think people will learn what are the responsibility with them. So once the message comes, so no point of trying to protect their, the properties. Better to save their life. So I think that message has been gone to the deep in their mind.
Right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Sugeshwara. You're from the Department of Irrigation. Farming is one of our most celebrated livelihoods in Sri Lanka, although farmers in Sri Lanka do undergo a lot of difficulties. Do you consider yourself and I'm talking about the irrigation department as a whole, do you consider yourself to be one of the major stakeholders in this disaster enterprise, or do you think more needs to be done by you? If so, what is it?
Yeah, really, actually we have started already addressing this disaster prevention. Now we have started studying around 11 river basins in this country, major river basins, including Kalani, Kalu, Mahaveli, like. Even though it's 11 river basin, it covers entirely half of the island.
Okay.
Most disaster flood-prone river basins.
Right.
Now our plan is to introduce investment plan for next couple of years for flood prevention as well as drought mitigation.
Right.
Within next couple of months, we will be getting the reports and what needs to be done for flood mitigation.
Right. So these studies will result in reports being compiled, and you're expecting these reports to be completed during the next few months?
Yeah, already now we are studying, and actually we have a fund get from World Bank.
Yeah, okay.
And under that World Bank, now a team is working on that.
Right.
Now,
and these findings, don't you think it's great if you could publish it online so that academia and other stakeholders can also have a look at this?
Yeah, definitely. It will be published. It will be published, and the
Department of Irrigation has a website.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you undertake to publish this online?
Yeah,
so that other stakeholders can also engage?
Yeah, generally we distribute among the stakeholders when we get the reports.
Right.
And
but you can also put it online so that it's easy for everyone else to access it easily.
These are kind of highly technical reports. No, you know, this distributing among stakeholders, they can decide on what to do. But I think these kind of highly technical reports publishing on websites, I don't think it is. But
okay,
if
you
somebody
don't think
requests,
it's practical? Okay.
Yeah, if somebody requests, we can of course provide. And other thing is, we have an investment plan, and we have already the next step is also ready for implementing. For Kalani River, next couple of years we will be starting building structures for flood prevention.
Right. Thank you very much. Mr. Firshan Hashim, I move to you now. You spoke of the Dune app. Can you elaborate on that? So that people watching us right now can also download it. It's free for download, right?
Yes, it's free for download, and it's the property of the Disaster Management Center. The advantage of the Dune app is continuously the SMS messages are converted into a message where you receive under this app, and it also will alert you in case of evacuation alert. Even if the phone is off, it will beep so much that you need to look at the message, and then you can act accordingly. The issue with that is how best can the message which is being sent out by DMC be sent in in all three languages, and also in layman's language where it can be understood by them, and then the people can take necessary precaution. And the other is the public awareness campaign, which is extremely important. All these agencies should not only rely on the DMC, because DMC, the Ministry of Disaster Management's mandate is the coordinating mandate, and
Right.
the disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management is everybody's business, and it's not only the government's business, it's the private sector, it's the civil society. Everybody needs to be at it. So it is very important that everybody be a part of it and be made aware about the risks that the risks with regards to hazards and disasters.
Mr. Hashim, we sometimes find that media is not effectively used enough in this enterprise, because the government obviously can't do it alone, the private sector can't do it alone, so all these stakeholders need to now come together. For example, we tend to ignore the newspapers, we tend to ignore radio, we tend to forget that fishermen who are out at sea don't really get the opportunity to watch TV. So there's no point really in issuing an early warning on television. So are there SMS services? Is there anything else that can be done?
Yes, this is exactly, see, we were discussing quite a lot about how the message can go to people like that.
Yeah.
So Dune is one of the important app that which is there, which could be used by everybody, and that can be tweaked to ensure that they get the message right. Here the key again is partnership. How can we get partners to be involved? The government would look at working within their ambit, but how can partnership be one of their key components in their engagement? Media is a very important and a very powerful tool. How can we maximize the media, and how can all of these stakeholders be involved in all our government related discussions and the forums? So I think that partnership with regards to stakeholders, whether it is the private sector, the government and the NGOs, INGOs and the development partners, is extremely important.
Thank you very much. My final question for tonight is to Commander Janaka Samaranayaka from the Sri Lankan Navy. To conclude this conversation, can you once again outline the process of conducting awareness campaigns across the island, which is done by the Navy?
So basically the awareness campaigns are being conducted by the agencies, and the Sri Lankan Navy also a part of it. So when the other agencies get together and conduct the rehearsals and the drills with regard to the disasters, so we also join hand with them and make aware the publics to the local authorities and agencies. So that is how the Navy engages in the awareness.
Right. Are you satisfied with the response of the communities at large? Do you see proactive engagement? Do you see that communities and other stakeholders who are engaged with the Sri Lankan Navy, do you see a positive sort of response?
Of course, because people have learnt lessons.
Are there any gaps that need to be addressed, which could be so addressed this time around?
You are talking about with regard to the awareness of
Yes.
the people. I think that the people know that by experience, they know that when the rainy season comes, the flood is imminent. So as Mr. Hashim earlier mentioned, the people are reluctant to respond, even though knowing the message. So still they are reluctant to move out, because they don't like to leave away their properties, so they have a fear of losing their properties and the safety.
Fine. So perhaps we need to then look at creating an attitudinal shift in the people. Gentlemen, am I right?
Yes, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for all your thoughts. So from the beginning, let me thank for joining today's very fruitful discussion Mr. J.M.S. Jayavira, Director Preparedness and Planning of the Disaster Management Center. Thank you for your presence here today and for sharing your thoughts, your perspectives and the role that you play in this enterprise. I'd also like to thank Mr. S. Premalal, Director General of the Department of Meteorology. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Also Dr. R. Siri Karunawardana, Director General, NBRO, the National Building Research Organization, doing a fantastic role. Thank you for being very vocal, and thank you for also addressing the concerns that lie before you. Mr. S.P.S. Sugishwara, Chief Engineer, Irrigation Department, thank you very much for your presence. Mr. Firzan Hashim, Country Director, APAD, thank you for the massive role that you play, and for working with us as well to ensure that Sri Lanka works towards a zero deaths policy in 2018. Thank you very much. Finally, Commander Janaka Samaranayaka, Senior Staff Officer Operations of the Sri Lanka Navy. Thank you for your presence here today. What a productive discussion. I started off this conversation by saying that the flooding in May 2016 saw 200 deaths. The flooding in May 2017 saw 300 deaths, with hundreds of thousands of people being displaced. Reacting to disaster once a disaster happens is something that we're used to doing, but now we need to move forward to disaster risk reduction, disaster prevention, disaster mitigation. How do we create awareness among the public? How do we engage with the communities? How do we engage with players at local levels, at grassroots levels? How do we engage the general public on the one hand, the private sector, the government sector? How do we work in partnership, in collaboration? It's not easy, but it must be done. Whilst thanking the gentleman very much for being here tonight, and also our viewers for watching us, and for also the several questions that were asked. I'd like to leave you tonight. But before that, I'd like to thank Charika Fernando and Naveen Majid for the fantastic round of questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks once again. Good night.